Right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Dorset Police and Crime Panel Quarter 2 review. Mark, could I ask you to go through your apologies, please?
Thanks, Chair. So we've got apologies from Councillor Dove, Councillor Barrow, Councillor Johnson and Ian McVie. And we've got two members joining us virtually, which is Councillor Haynes and Councillor Howell.
Thank you. I trust everyone's had a chance to read all the minutes from the last meeting. Does anybody have any points they'd like to raise on those minutes? Thank you. Mark, could I ask you to go through the actions, please?
Thanks, Chair. So we have a number of actions, and I'll go through those one by one. So first up, information on the community grant scheme to be provided to panel members to advertise to communities.
Good morning. Well, firstly, thank you, because the panel members all gave their support. That action is complete.
Thank you. The second action is a report to be brought to the panel in respect of increasing the detection rate for burglaries, and that will be added to the forward plan. Moving on down, update on 101 contract requested as part of next quarterly report.
So, as we mentioned last time, we didn't have an update then. We've had no news since on that contract, but we're obviously keeping our eye on it and waiting to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on down, clarification of process for ensuring appropriate use of body-worn video.
So, all uniformed operational encounters with members of the public are to be recorded on body-worn video by all officers present who are equipped with a body-worn video camera. This will be all officers given those devices as personal issue. The footage is then to be downloaded to secure storage at the end of the operational shift when the footage was recorded, or in exceptional circumstances as soon as practicable. So I hope that clarifies the process.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, information on the turnover of domestic abuse advisors to be sought.
I'm happy to confirm that my office has spoken to the relevant team. I'm informed that our police IDVAs do not have a fast turnover. In fact, they are police staff and tend to be within the organisation for years. We have 3 agency staff due to the COVID uplift funding for DAA, and even they have been with us for 2 years. So it's a pretty stable team there. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chair, that's all the actions gone through.
Thanks, Mark. Just for members of the public, Commissioner, could you very briefly explain the 101 contract, because I'm conscious that there's other information on 101 later in the meeting.
Okay, well, last September, the Home Office advised that it required a partner to manage, operate and administer the 101 single non-emergency number. And they put that notice out on the National Contracts Finders Service. Neither PCCs nor Chief Constables actually were informed of what was going on, nor subsequently. So that's why I can confirm we've had no further update. We're in the same situation as we were. We know this contract is out for tender, but we know nothing more about it.
Thank you very much. That's excellent. Mark, moving swiftly on, declarations of interest.
Thanks, Chair. So this is just the opportunity for panel members to make any declarations that are necessary to ensure compliance with the Code of Conduct. So is there any declarations to make?
Yes, Chair. I don't know if it's relevant, but I'll declare it anyway. Under the item for road safety, it's just to say that I am a member of a local community speed watch group.
Thanks. We'll just note that, Chair.
Yep, thank you for that, Mark. Okay, right a minute. Public participation.
And we've got no questions from the public and no petitions.
Thank you very much. So moving on to the meat of this meeting, the quarterly monitoring report. First off, welcome, Commissioner, to this meeting. Appreciate you and your staff coming here. Before I move on, there is under item 6, the finance element, I'd like to pass on the panel's thanks to Jim McManus, who will be retiring from Dorset Council soon. Jim has been a great help to the panel in providing advice and guidance on scrutiny of the finance elements of the Police and Crime Commissioner's report. So moving on to item 5, then, if I could, there's two issues that I'd like to raise before we actually move into the quarterly report. First one, PCC has been in the public domain, talking about upgrading the reclassification of cannabis to Class A from Class B. I suppose the question really from the PCP's perspective is we would like to seek a view from the PCC on his stance, his Class A stance, when the National Police Chiefs Council wished to see a more graded approach to possession. I suppose the discussion really hinges around how you and your Chief Constable are going to move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Look, this is a complicated area, the whole issue around drugs and their usage. We could talk literally for the whole meeting about this. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to constrain my comments to two things. One is to explain why I took that stance in the first place, very briefly, and then to talk about how that fits with the NPCC and indeed locally. So the reason that stance I took is, firstly, I think we've got to remember that actually cannabis as Class B is an illegal drug. That means that there are issues around its possession and indeed its supply. Now, the reason that we were suggesting, and it was not me alone, that we change that to a Class A, are because we see the harm that is occurring with cannabis in our local communities. I could give you a number of stories where it is the first entry-level drug that kids get involved with, and it takes them into places where they don't need to go. Then there is also the individual harm. There has been much work done over the last 5 years about looking at harm with cannabis across the world where it is legalized versus where it is not, and issues around psychosis, birth defects, cancer, and premature aging, to name but a few. And in the last point, which I think is a really, really important point, when From Harm to Hope, the 10-year drug strategy came out, it said it had 3 arms: tough enforcement, effective treatment, and impactful prevention. When you actually look at what we're talking about regarding investment, a lot of it is still focused on heroin and crack cocaine, but much less is focused on illegal gateway drugs such as cannabis, MDMA, and ketamine. What that means is there is relatively less investment around the treatment, and the last figures I saw, the main issue for our young people, the main drug they are in treatment for is cannabis. So there's poor investment there, and there is not enough done around prevention and actually stopping our kids get into this stuff in the first place. So the actual stance that we're taking is, whether we get Class A or not is irrelevant, it is provoking discussion about the need for those investments. And that's part of our intention. Now, regarding the NPCC, well, I think we're conflating two things here. The NPCC, their responsibility is very much to uphold the law, and they are a broad church. The difference between Class B and Class A regarding what they will do is relatively small. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't have, for example, diversion, out-of-court disposals and those sorts of things. But I do not serve the NPCC. I serve the people of Dorset and do the best to keep this county safe. So the real big issue is, where is my Chief Constable around the whole drug issue? And let's be clear, my current Chief Constable is tough on drugs, and the new Chief Constable will also be tough on drugs, else he won't, or she won't get the job. So it is really about the stance here to keep our people safe, which is the most important thing. The MPCC, as I say, is a broad church with many, many different philosophies within it, and therefore they will have a very graded approach. We do what we need to do to keep the people of Dorset safe. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And then moving on to the next question, the HMIC FRS produced a report on vetting, misconduct and misogyny in the police service. And I suppose this panel, this panel actually seeks assurance from the Commissioner that you've confirmed that the Chief Constable will action the relevant recommendations within this report, the HMIC report, and secondly, sought assurance from the Chief Constable that the current Dorset Police recruiting programme for the uplift in numbers meets the required stringent vetting process. Thank you.
Thank you. Really, really important area. Members may recall that last year, I actually formally challenged the Chief Constable on a number of key areas, including the force's vetting procedures, anti-corruption capabilities, and the robustness of the Dorset Police response to allegations of wrongdoing. I received not only a detailed response to the challenge, but the assurance that Dorset Police will continue to prioritise standards in these areas, so that the public can have confidence in this hugely important area. Members may also be aware that more recently there have been 2 separate reports from His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary Fire and Rescue Services relating to vetting and counter-corruption arrangements. The first, which was a national report, attracted the more prominent media coverage and commentary, with the Inspectorate concluding that a culture of misogyny, sexism and predatory behaviour towards female police officers and staff and members of the public still exists in many forces. Inspectors found examples of police officers transferring between forces despite a history of concerning intelligence complaints or misconduct allegations. And HMIC FRS made 43 recommendations as a result. It was, quite frankly, a shocking read. But having immediately sought reassurance, I can confirm that none of those officers and staff identified within the national report were found to be in Dorset. And the vetting of all officers, staff, volunteers and contractors is up to date in Dorset Force. The second report specifically considered the effectiveness of the Dorset Police's vetting and counter-corruption arrangements. It stated that the force had made significant progress, acknowledging that the force has an effective vetting system, that it is good at predicting future vetting demand, and also praising the force's counter-corruption control strategy. The report also provided further recommendations for improvement. These recommendations were all accepted, and my office will continue to work closely with Dorset Police to ensure that these are embedded as soon as possible, and that the high standards that the force have placed upon them are not only met, but exceeded. So since that inspection in March, the force has already made some of the significant improvements. For instance, the force has modernised IT systems to help monitor and proactively collect intelligence from desktop and handheld devices, including, and really important this, given the publicity that has occurred in other places, the acceptable use of apps. And additional resources have been allocated to the counter-corruption unit to help weed out corruption and unacceptable behaviour. Chair, the public should quite rightly have confidence that Dorset Police will work proactively to identify unprofessional and unethical officers and staff, and that when standards do fall below the expectations, the force then takes swift action. I, alongside my office, will continue to scrutinise the force's performance in this vital aspect of policing. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Does, very briefly, does anybody have any questions they'd like to follow up on what the Commissioner's just said? No? Yes. Councillor Kirby.
Go on then, Chair. It's only purely slightly operational, so I do apologise, but I am aware that we're referring to a case that's obviously in the newspapers at the moment. I'm aware that there's an ongoing IOPC investigation going on into those messages, etc. Will he be acting on the IOPC's recommendations when they come out, if there are any recommendations that come out through that report?
We would always take into account the IOPC and recommendations that come forward. I mean, this is very much, as you say, it's very much an operational thing. It sounds like it's an investigation that's ongoing, so therefore I'm not going to comment on it specifically. You know that, Andrew. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much then. Commissioner, if I can ask you to then move on and formally introduce your quarterly monitoring report for Q2. And we are more or less on schedule time-wise as well, which is good.
Chair, I will try not to disrupt your timing. Thank you. So this is Q2 report, which deals with effectively the high summer. As before, what I'll do is I'll go through each individual area. So the first area that we have is that of cutting crime and antisocial behaviour. And as we can see, we have a total crime reduction of about 4%. Something I would highlight is that the total ASB incidence is also going down, even though it's high summer, even though we have the population of Bristol who have rocked up to be on holiday in Dorset, and the demand has basically increased, as we always understand it will. What I'd like to do is draw the panel's attention to a few things. One thing is very clearly, and I know that there is a paper on it later, but road safety, we very clearly are doing a lot of moves in this area. I'm very clear that we need to constantly make awareness around drink and drug drive campaigns. I'm not only supporting the force with my office and the PR around that locally, I am also lobbying the Home Office around this as well, because we have two different demographics there. We have an older demographic who tend to be those who drink drive. But in society more widely, it is more unacceptable than ever to actually get in a car if you're drunk. It is not quite the same with drug driving. That tends to be a younger demographic, and there is social media which glamorizes the taking of illegal drugs. So I'm campaigning to the Home Office that they need different messaging for the different people. That's one of the things which is actively going on, as well as the local drink drive campaigns. I take this very seriously. In fact, I take every opportunity where possible and time allowing to go out with the No Excuses team and the road traffic police in order to see what they're doing. I also take the opportunity to lobby. And there is a disparity between the fines for different motoring offences. And we will keep badgering the Transport Minister, depending, of course, which one it is. We seem to have settled out now on that. And I will be also working with other members of the PCC fraternity to do the same thing. When we look at crime and antisocial behaviour, we launched the second tranche of the Operation Relentless Community Fund. This is where communities can apply for between 100 and £5,000. And again, we had another 12 organisations coming forward with various projects. So we have now collectively, across the two tranches, done 21 projects across Dorset. And I was grateful for the panel's help in publicising that, as it was mentioned earlier. We've worked in order to try and increase awareness around fraud and cybercrime. We know that fraud and cybercrime are a wicked problem. We know that it is usually generated not necessarily from Dorset. But what we can do is we can keep making the noise, and we can keep banging the prevention drum. And the Safer Dorset Business Partnership and its members were provided with fraud and cybercrime training and signposting to information to try and help businesses stay safe from those two issues. And then I come to something which I know was picked up in the press because it's red, but I wish they'd waited for the context. So that's burglary. It's red because we are constantly talking to the force about the best way in order to improve this. And we're improving on an ever-improving picture. Non-dwelling burglary, I draw your attention, is 22.2% down, and dwelling burglary is 17% down. We have mechanisms in place which allow the force to address spates of burglary. I know because I've been in Gillingham to talk about it. And I think it was 3 days I went up there, and Dorset Police had caught the fella because they have good routines around this. And they also have very good routines about frequent flyers. So that's red because we are looking at what we've currently got, seeing if there's anything that we need to add, and looking to see if there is anything more in prevention. It is not red because burglary is being addressed badly in Dorset. And I reassured myself of this to check the actual attendance at burglary. And I'm satisfied that dwelling burglaries get 100% attendance from the Dorset force in one way or another. And then we've got the other red one here, which is the support for young people. So this was something that we wanted to basically bring in, and there's a couple of reasons for this. One is because we know that we have some great people in Dorset, great young people. We also have some young people who fall into doing a bit of antisocial behaviour. And then on top of that, we have the issue that sort of antisocial behaviour can lead on to other things. And then I won't take time to tell stories, but I do know of children who have started off with a bit of antisocial behaviour and then wound up running in county lines. So it's very, very important that we get this piece right, and there's a number of work streams around it. One that we've brought forward is we've developed a Fix the Future grant work stream, which we did the homework for across the summer, talked to the local authorities about where the gaps were, and I'll bring forward more information about that in the next quarter's report. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Commissioner. Before I bring Sherry in for a question, May, you're the lead on this. Do you have any points you'd like to raise?
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for that report. So I have a few points to raise and some questions to ask. So do you want me to just list out all the questions so that you can then address them all together? Yes? Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. So first of all, I just wanted to also acknowledge the fall in the antisocial behaviour, and I can speak from the BCP point of view that yes, we have seen a reduction, which is really good news. And judging by the overall reduction, that I'm hoping that also means that there's been a reduction in Dorset Council. So just wanted to acknowledge the good work and the hard work that's actually gone into that. So the questions I have are, I'll take them in order, is in the road safety. I know we have an item later on in the agenda, but I just wanted to ask with the fines, whether that also includes parking fines, because obviously there's been a lot of complaints about cars being parked badly and then causing disruption, and in some cases making roads not easy to actually drive down because they're parking on both sides and causing therefore road safety issues. And we've been told time and time again that because it's set at a national level, there's nothing we can do about it. Just wondering whether that also includes the parking FPN. And then the other one I wanted to ask was to do with the burglary, that there's the commitment from the force that you will attend all residential burglaries in the county. So how do you tie that up with the fact that in order for the force to attend, the crime has to be reported? And if people are having trouble trying to report it via 101, how does that work? So I think it kind of ties in with 101, and I know we are always talking about 101 and reporting, etc., etc., and also what the rough, I guess, turnaround time is from when a crime is reported, a burglary is reported, to when someone, a police officer, actually does attend. Because I think it wouldn't surprise you, Commissioner, if I were to say some people think, oh, well, if my bike's been stolen from the shed, well, do you know what? It's no point me reporting because no one's going to do anything. And then obviously the last point is the Fix the Future. I was going to say just what you said, which is look forward to hearing more about it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Meg. String of questions there, Commissioner.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes, and I'll take them in order. So first of all, thank you for the comments around ASB. Look, I'm going to be naughty. I'm going to talk about the now. The Chief Constable actually had a meeting with his senior officers last week, which I was there for as well, where we were kind of giving an update of where we got to. And he talked of a 34% reduction in ASB, taking us back to pre-pandemic levels. So I am confident it is happening across the county. What there will always be, though, is there will always be a hotspot. And there will always be an area where we've got an ASB issue that needs to be addressed. And it is making certain that we get a consistent and coherent and robust effect every time in those areas. That's what I'm working with the force to achieve at the moment. You talked about parking fines. Well, very clearly that is a local authority council matter. However, I am aware of the huge pressure, particularly on our coastal areas during the summer. And so I did sign a joint letter with the local authority leaders, both Drew Meller and Spencer Flower, which we sent to the Transport Minister in order to try and get some traction around parking fines. I'm afraid we got the answer you alluded to, in that it is set on a national basis. So we were unable to achieve what we wanted, which was a temporary uplift to deter. Nevertheless, we'll try again. And then we come to burglary and to attend residential burglaries. Well, how this happens is that burglaries are graded, and are graded according to the threat. So a grade 1 burglary, the person might still be on the premises, for example. A grade 2 burglary is something where you can get forensic evidence and that sort of thing. And there's something that you can get your arms around very quickly. For both of those, the force attends 100% of them. Incidents which don't fit into those categories, 50% are deployed at the time of the incident, so this is immediate, while the remainder is advised to the local stations for subsequent attendance and victim support. So that's why I'm confident they're doing their thing around burglaries in total. I'm talking about the residential burglaries in total. Your point about 101 is well made. I will come on and speak specifically about the 101 numbers in the next priority. But I'll say the things which I've said before. We are doing significant investment in order to try and address the whole of the response area. We need to do a communication piece and constantly do it around what needs to be reported where, because 101 is used as a clearinghouse for a lot of things which is not police activity. And we also need to try to encourage people when they use 101 to actually email. Now, when they email, all those pieces of intelligence are used. So you might have a vehicle's color, you might have a vehicle's registration number. That all gets linked up. So really that's a message which I'd like everybody to give is with 101, please email if you can and send that intelligence in and report it. And it will get acted on. So depending on when the burglary has happened, if it's a 999, it's occurred, maybe somebody in the house or somebody has just left. If you've come back from holiday 2 weeks later, then I would guess that's going to be an email or a 101 response. But it will still get dealt with by the police if it's a residential burglary.
Do you have any follow-up, May?
Just a couple of comments, which is to welcome the Commissioner's continued support to help both BCP and Dorset to lobby for increase or the authority to increase parking FPNs. And I guess this other comment relates to the burglary, that there probably is a piece of work to promote the fact that if you report the burglary, there will be attendance. But then again, it depends on the threat and the harm that has been caused from the crime. I think a lot of people, what I'm saying is probably there may be underreporting because there's petty crime, and quite often petty theft is committed by some known individuals. Although this may be anecdotal, but it is normally known individuals that commit these petty thefts, and that if they are actually dealt with, then we would actually see further reduction. So just asking, I guess, the Commissioner to promote the fact that burglaries that are reported, there will be attendance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, May. Moving on, Sherry.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Sherry Jesperson, Dorset Council. Delighted to see that the antisocial behaviour and theft and violence figures are falling. That's very good news. But it's fairly widely understood that in difficult times when people are feeling cost of living pressures and feeling themselves to be poorer, these low-level crime of this nature within the community tends to rise. So can we have assurance that in your forward planning you've factored the current difficult times in, and that you won't therefore divert resources from this area because the figures are looking better, but you will anticipate the fact that they might go back up again for external reasons? Thank you.
So a couple of things. If I can first address Councillor Haynes' comment there, one of the things we're pretty sure about is there is very few burglaries which are actually underreported because of the insurance factor. And people want to claim on the insurance. So whilst I understand that it's not beyond the bounds of possibility, I think there are other areas of business, if I can put it that way, which are very much more underreported. We are going to make certain that we publicise exactly what's happening with burglary and make a deal about it, not least because of the fact that the burglary figures are going down, and we need to share that good news. Regarding your point, Councillor Jesperson, let me reassure you, one of the things that I'm very clear about is that we do not stop. The Policing Crime Plan was created for 7 years. It was created to give consistency for 7 years. Just because we have good news now does not mean that we're going to have good news in the future. And certainly we are not going to take our feet off of the accelerator. That is absolutely not a thought. We're going to keep on going. We're going to keep on pushing to drive down ASB. We're going to keep on pushing to drive down crime across Dorset. Thank you.
Les.
Thank you, Chair. I'm aware of a few issues that are currently which don't fit in with this. They're local policing issues where the response has been less than desired. Now, I won't go into specifics of them, but a handbag stolen locally, police didn't respond to when the cards were used for 30 days and the CCTV's been lost. The theft of a valuable small item locally, they called the police. What I'll do is I'll raise those with Simon or through offline with specifics or Adam. But there's a disconnect. You want a better connection with the community, but people are saying, what's the point? We don't get a response. That's what I'm getting back, Commissioner.
So let me make it very clear. I want to hear about those sorts of instances immediately. I don't want to wait until we have a quarterly police and crime panel meeting. You know, I want that fed into me at the office for me to raise with the force. That is what I do. Now, the world's imperfect. Sometimes there's a screw up. But the only way that we improve and Dorset Police gets better and we get that consistency across the county that I'm driving for is for me to know about those instances. So I really want that as soon as possible so I can raise it with the Chief Constable, which I do every Monday morning if I have any of those. So thank you.
Commissioner, I'm looking to get information, but you try and encourage people to make a complaint. And I believe it's probably a national problem, but they say, what's the point? But I am digging, trying to get information on those cases, which I will pass to Simon. Thank you.
If I may follow up on that, obviously I had a conversation with Les earlier on. I would like to sort of ask, and I use my words carefully here, I would like to ask if we could get an action for a response back to the Q3 on your response to these questions of theft outside of the home and discussions that you will subsequently have with the Chief Constable on this issue.
That's absolutely fine with me.
Thank you very much. And does that meet your... Brilliant, excellent. So we'll take that up at the next meeting. So I am conscious of time. Does anybody... No? Andrew?
Hello, thank you, Chair. And just looking through the figures, and back when I was previously on the Community Safety Partnership, we were aware that obviously the crime increases over the summer months to reflect the amount of tourism that comes into the area. I think it's a bit of a toxic issue, really, because it must be very difficult for you to engage with visitors, especially before they've come down to Dorset, to explain that, you know, Dorset, we don't want antisocial behaviour and it's not appropriate in our area. But I think the frustration for me is that Dorset Police are often called up to go outside of Dorset to go and support police events in places like London, etc. How are we able to draw on additional resources from outside of Dorset to reflect the additional numbers that come through without potentially financially impacting on the current budget?
So you've put a pin in one of my biggest frustrations. So yes, you're right, there is mutual aid, which forces across the country are expected to help with. Largely from Dorset's perspective, that tends to be specialist rather than general elements within the force. Nevertheless, we have been expected to help out with the Commonwealth Games, the G7, I think it was, in Devon and Cornwall. And we do not have 1 penny extra given to us for our summer demand. This is something which I lobby about consistently, and I will actually come back to under the Every Penny Counts section of this talk. Regarding the regarding the situation of mutual aid for big events, I do know that there is some national talk about this because we are relatively insulated. We don't tend to have big events happen on our patch the way other places do. But when they happen outside London, for example, then it does put a huge pressure on the local force. I know there is some talk about this being addressed and shared out fairer than what it is at the moment. So I hope that helps.
Supplementary to that, I suppose it's not a question, it's really what can we do as a police and crime panel to ensure that we get the right levels of policing over the summer months. I think that's something we'll perhaps address at a later agenda item.
So I'm going to move on now to making policing more visible and connected. Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. So making policing more visible and connected. So very clearly we've been promoting the police uplift. We are still very much on track for our uplift targets. Not every force in the country is, but we are. And you'll also be aware that during this time period, we became the 7th safest county in England and Wales. We started off at 10th before the pandemic, and we moved to 7th by this time. I'm also very keen that engagement and connectivity gets changed, both culturally across the force, but also by my own office. And this summer we were able to get out and about in a way that we couldn't quite the summer before. It was very pleasing to see the summer events come back, the agricultural shows across the county. And we also put in something new, which was the summer safety survey. I want to take the temperature of the Dorset public to check that we're still on track with the police and crime plan, and there is no new threat that has suddenly come out the woodwork. And we're very pleased to do that. And gratifying, nearly 60% of respondents said that Dorset was either the safest county or one of the safest counties in England and Wales. We also had a lot of talk with the force about their neighbourhood policing teams, about the contact which they were having, and also about how that was visible on their websites. But that work actually came to fruition in the next quarter, so I'll leave it until then. The big deal, which we've kind of touched and danced around beforehand, is you will see the figures there. 999 calls were down to 79.4% answered within 10 seconds, and the average 101 time of 16.5. Nevertheless, that this is high summer, I still do not feel that we are anywhere where we need to be with those at this moment in time. And we know that part of the problem is lack of investment over years. That is being addressed. But I clearly decided what I would do is put in a challenge on emergency response times to the force. Now, that emergency response time has a number of elements. One element is the time of reporting, some of which is outside of our control as well. But it's also from the instant that report's been made and a decision has been taken, how long it is for somebody to get to where they need to be. And all those aspects are part of that response challenge. So the force put in a gold group in order to assess this and get it right, and they're reporting back. So I will come back to you with our answer in the future around that and what we found out and what is being changed. I should give some comfort going forward. Response times to 999s, I think the last numbers I saw, and Simon will correct me if I'm wrong, we had a scrutiny panel last week, and I believe it was 92% answered within 10 seconds, above the 90% number. And the number for 101, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was 5.7 minutes. So somehow or other, and this is part of the response challenge, somehow or other we have to get the bump in the summer right, which once again goes back to the comment I said earlier. We don't get an extra bean to run that extra demand. And when you think that we had a weekend when the 999 calls were the highest ever in Dorset, you can see the oil tanker we're trying to turn there. But nevertheless, we will bring those investments in. We are recruiting more people into the Force Command Centre, and we will act on the recommendations from that response challenge. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Unfortunately, Mr. McVie is not here today for personal reasons. Of the 40% who fed back to you that for whatever reason they didn't believe it was the safest county or one of the safest counties in England and Wales, what was the sort of justifications that they gave you, if any?
What I'll do is I'll come back with the detail around that, if I may. I will send you a written answer regarding that. Some of it will be don't know. I should make one small point. The eagle-eyed amongst the panel may have noticed that there is a change in the measure of success, percentage of people who feel Dorset Police do a good job in their area. It looks like it's gone backwards and down to 66%. I'm afraid I am hoist on the petard that the force have changed their supplier and methodology around that survey. So I am going to have to see how that plays out over the coming months. That to me is something which we can't use as a valid comparison at this moment in time. The summer safety survey, I'll come back to you with the reasons as we unpick them. So I hope that makes sense.
I understand, Adam, you've got a response. Thank you for joining us in your hour of illness.
That's quite right. Good morning, everyone. We will, of course, come back with a written answer, but just to provide a couple of insights. The first thing with the summer survey is to say it was very much a gut feel. So you ask people, do they think it's safest or not safest? And generally speaking, we didn't get a lot more elaboration for people than that. But what we would say is when people don't say that it's one of the safest counties, it will typically be because they have personally experienced a crime, whether it be to themselves or a friend or a neighbour. So, of course, the nature of those types of surveys is very personal to the individual, and you would rightly think that someone who might have experienced something within a few weeks before is very unlikely to say that Dorset is the safest county. But the purpose of a survey like that is to get a perception and to try to give the panel and the public some indication, because the Commissioner says he wants us to be the safest county, on how we're going to judge that in the future, so that we've got a baseline going forward.
Thanks very much, Adam, and thank you again for raising yourself from your deathbed. We really appreciate that. Thank you. Does anybody have any points? Yes.
This is a congratulatory point, actually, Commissioner, to say the fact is that we had 2 community officers outside Goulds in Dorchester a few weeks ago, just engaging in the public, and it was well received, absolutely well received, and I'm very pleased to say that it actually happened. Sarah was there, and I cannot remember the other officer's name because she was new to the force, but just to say I was glad to see it, and I'd see more of that on the streets would be greatly received, but it was well received by the community, and thank you. It was good news.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really pleased about that because the engagement piece is the hardest thing to actually get right. I am very clear that we are getting more engagement across Dorset and we're measuring more engagement across Dorset. And there will be more things I will bring to the panel in the future because there's been more changes recently. But that's really good to hear. That's exactly what I want to happen. Thank you.
Okay, moving on then to fighting violent crime and high harm. Commissioner.
Indeed. So these are the things that keep me awake at night. The first thing I'll say, though, is and I do apologise to the panel, there is an error in the paper. The error is that the number which says minus 11.4% is not the number which should have been in there. We've had it clarified from the force, and it is a reduction of 6%, which should be in there. So I'd just like the panel to note that. That is going in the way it should be going. But unfortunately, a wrong number was chosen to give to us. I think that's the only way I can say that. Look, this is the wicked stuff. This is the stuff which drives a lot of the violence on our area. Basically, what we've done is literally about a year ago, there was a thing called From Harm to Hope, a 10-year drug strategy that the government put into place. And it was incredibly insightful because it was based on Dame Carol Black's work. And so what it did was it didn't have the pendulum extremes, which drug policy has always had in this country. Either you basically have to do nothing but try and help somebody, or you lock everybody up. Neither of those ways works on its own. You need tough enforcement around the drug dealers and those people who are making everybody's lives a misery. You need effective treatment for those who are addicted. And you need, above all else, impactful prevention to stop people getting into this mess in the first place. And From Harm to Hope does those three things. The prevention is the area that they need to do more work on. I'm very clear every time I speak to them as being a member of the Addiction and Substance Misuse. I'm co-chair of that portfolio for the PCCs. And I make the point they are not doing enough about prevention, particularly with illegal gateway drugs. But we will get there with that. How this actually works in practice on the ground is through something called a Combating Drugs Partnership. That has a senior responsible officer. In Dorset's case, it's me, and it has a number of work streams, subgroups, if you will. So we had our first meeting in September. It is a pan-Dorset initiative. It is a multi-partner initiative. And the subgroups are, we have analytics, which does the needs assessments and drives the outcome numbers, makes certain we're getting that piece right. We have a enforcement subgroup, which is chaired by the Director of Intelligence in Dorset Police, but that brings together partners such as the community safety partnerships, prisons, probation, make certain that we get the whole of the enforcement piece right. And you will know that there has been a lot of work done with Operation Viper, Operation Scorpion. I'm not going to go into those here because we've talked about them before. The second one is the effective treatment piece. And that brings together not only health, not only public health, but other areas such as lived experience, those people who have been through addiction, but also housing and Department of Work and Pensions to put in place the wraparound areas to address the needs of those people who are addicted and how to help them get out of it. And then finally, the prevention. Prevention is chaired by Teresa Levy, who is Chair of Youth Justice across Dorset. And the prevention piece will look at primarily addressing the issue of young people and getting into drug taking to prevent them getting into it. The area we have not done under prevention is that of the, if I can put it, the weekend dinner party cocaine sniffing set. That we've decided is best addressed with the consequences for drug possession white paper referred to in the report, which again I have inputted to as the co-chair of the Addiction and Substance Misuse. We believe that actually that is probably the best way of making that difference. And it is about trying to get youngsters not to take these drugs, not to take the path into exploitation. That is where we can have best value with a prevention partnership. So I took a little bit of time in that area to explain because the Combating Drug Partnership is a new initiative. We have very great hopes for it across Dorset, and that work is ongoing. What else have we got? We've got the issue there of child abuse, and something which I'm very keen on is the issue around those children who see things and are abused in a domestic abuse situation. What Operation Encompass does is it notifies the schools and partner agencies if a child is found to have witnessed or been part of a domestic abuse incident. And that should happen the next day, so that we can basically wrap around our young people when that occurs. Now, it has happened for some time in secondary schools. But now it's moved not only to primary schools, but actually sharing and involving children aged 5 and under. And we're moving down the age range to improve the safeguarding. So I'm very pleased about that and the direction of travel that it's going. Violence against women and girls, you will know that that has come to the fore more than ever in the last year. I was very pleased to support Dorset Council's successful bid for the Safer Streets Fund. And that had two elements which clearly will help with this. One is the stalking clinic. We know how wicked stalking is as a crime, but it also funded CCTV in areas which can affect not only women and girls, but everybody's feelings of safety and well-being in public spaces at day and night. So I'm pleased that we're making progress in that regard as well, and I have ongoing discussions with both local authorities about safer streets and how we can get funding in the future. If I skip down, actually, because it also fits quite well when we're talking about domestic abuse and stalking, I'm very pleased we got an additional £261,000 into Dorset to support victims of both of those areas, which we need. You'll see over there under violence reduction, it talks about a violence reduction unit. Well, even in the fiscal pressures that we have, I am still battling to get a violence reduction unit, and I have hopes we'll get something off the ground. And I'll come back to you as we develop that. I mentioned Viper and Scorpion. I'm not going to go there again, but you will know that they are extremely successful operations, taking drugs off our streets and safeguarding our young and vulnerable people.
Thanks, Dave. May.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for that report. I don't have actually very much to add because I was going to ask for a little bit more detail on the harm to hope, but you've covered it quite well in your presentation. So I guess the only thing I wanted to say about that was to really ask what the measures of success would be for that, and that it would be nice to actually see something in future meetings to show what the impact has been of the Harm to Hope project or strategy as is actually detailed on there, and how it's actually made hopefully a positive impact on the community in Dorset in terms of tackling the issues with drugs. The other thing, the one thing that I did want to ask was, in the additional key indicators, the statistics for domestic violence, sexual harm and stalking prevention orders, it has doubled from the previous quarter, because I think the previous quarter, let me call it up, we had 53 and we're on to 126 in the quarter that we're looking at. Just wondering whether you could give a little bit more detail as to whether what has caused that increase, whether it's better reporting, that people are more aware, etc., and whether, in your view, Commissioner, that is actually a positive number because there's more awareness of it, or whether it's the other way around. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. If I can take the first question around the Combating Drugs Partnership from Harm to Hope and the outcomes. So the outcomes are clearly defined. They're part of the package of guidance which came down with From Harm to Hope, and they're being integrated into the work of each of the subgroups. So as the Combating Drug Partnership moves forward and reports, we'll be able to report on those outcomes. So I'm quite happy to come back to this panel at a future date, though give us a bit of time to get this thing up and running and embedded, and then we'll be able to show what we're driving for. To give you one of the measures, for example, it's the number of county lines in Dorset. So we have hard outcomes already defined, which we're looking at with the analytics group, actually at a workshop in March. So, that work's going forward. The other point that you make, which is about the domestic violence, sexual harm and stalking prevention orders, I am so pleased that that has gone up. One of the frustrations we had was that we knew that we should be doing more in that area, but we had a recruitment issue around lawyers, and that has now been solved. And so we now have, we're now operating at a level that I want us to be, and that's why it's gone up. We were not quite on the naughty step, but we weren't in the place where we needed to be, particularly regarding stalking prevention orders, and those have improved as well as the other two. So we now have the capability which we required. Does that help?
Yes, it does. And I kind of thought that that would be your response, that actually the fact that it has actually gone up in terms of the stalking is actually a positive step. Chair, if I could ask, maybe as an action point, the measures of success for the harm to hope, whether we could, perhaps is it possible for us to actually see it so that we will know for future meetings what we're looking at in terms of the measurable outcomes?
Yeah, absolutely. Very happy for that. I mean, there's a slide with them all on. We could send that across to you, this week if you wanted. Cool.
Right. No further points to raise, Chair.
Yeah,
thank you. And thank you,
much.
Commissioner.
Thank you, May, and thank you for your response there, Commissioner. We will put that on the forward work plan for discussion in the new year when we rescope our forward work plan. There's been a lot of reports in the media about grooming gangs. What assurance can you give this panel that Dorset is on top of prevention?
Can you just define the question a little bit more for me, Chair? Grooming gangs in what context? You're talking about gangs exploiting kids for drugs? Is that what you're talking about?
Exploitation.
Well, of course, the things are interlinked. I can assure you that there is close working between both the community safety partnerships and Dorset Police in this regard. It's on their work plans. It's one of the areas that they look at. It is an area that Dorset Police focus on, and we have made investments in our what we call our POLIT team, which is the team who actually have responsibility for looking at child sexual abuse. I hope that helps.
It does. It's not for this panel to go into detail, but you've assured the panel that work is ongoing to ensure that prevention is in place. So thank you for that. Moving on to, sorry, Les.
Yeah, it's just a technical point, Commissioner. I think you raised about the most serious violence, and we've got the IRL here up 11.4%, and you clarified that. It's disappointing perhaps that hasn't been clarified or changed before this meeting, because there'll be councillors reading the minutes thinking it's got, and not having your explanation. There'll be members of the public looking at the notes and probably doing yourself a disservice there. Just a point.
Les, the point is absolutely well made. I discovered that this morning. I discovered that within the last hour. This meeting particularly has had a very, very constrained timeline, and that's part of the function behind it. It shouldn't happen in the future, and I'm hoping it doesn't.
Can we see if that figure can be changed on the minute on the records for anybody from the public looking at those figures, please?
Yeah, thanks very much, Les. Point well made. Moving on, fighting rural crime. Commissioner.
Thank you. Again, this is a good news story. You'll be very aware that rural crime was an area that I've always felt has been underpowered. We started the process and put together a significant uplift in the rural crime team. You will have seen that, and we talked about that in the last quarter's report. This continued across the summer. It got to the stage where I was almost losing track. Every time I met them, there was more of them. There was 3 new special constables which have been recruited in the rural crime team. And we've also recruited a new Resilient Communities Coordinator into the force. Their purpose is basically to help increase the watch movement, and particularly the rural watch movement. Why is that important? Because, not being funny, we're all in it together. We know that neighbourhood watches add value very significantly. We have different watches in the rural area, and there were gaps. And there is an initiative at the moment, which I'll report on at a future date, to have rural mounted volunteers. This would in effect be a mounted neighbourhood watch, which would cover areas of Dorset hard to reach with vehicles. That is in process, and I'm also looking at what more we can do, for example, in the parish area. I've said before that I want something which I call Parish Watch, to basically help where you don't have enough people to have a full neighbourhood watch, but you still need a guardian. So that's happening. That's under the Rural Resources piece. We also launched the Country Watch website. This is to inform rural businesses and the public of news and developments. This serves as a one-stop shop for crime prevention advice and important information relating to not just rural crime, but also wildlife and heritage crime, which also is very much part of what the rural crime team do. Fly tipping. Now, of course, that doesn't just happen in our rural communities. It happens across the county. But there's a couple of things which we're doing here. One is we have now much closer coordination between the local authority, between the national waste environment teams, and you'll see that the rural crime team actually rolled over an illegal waste disposal site in Dorset. And these people don't just deposit stuff illegally as fly tipping, they do lots of other things as well. And they found £50,000 worth of suspected stolen machinery. So I'm confident that our fly tipping is moving to a different phase. Sorry, our fly tipping counteraction is moving to a different phase. I actually met with farmers to discuss this as part of the agenda for a NFU farmers meeting to talk about what more we could do. It's been brought to the Dorset Rural Crime Board as one of the key work streams, and we're looking at a number of different things that we can do. And the last point I'll make is there is an ongoing lobbying activity between not just myself, but now with the other PCCs in the Southwest to lobby upwards around a number of things, but primarily is to ask for significantly more sanctions around this. The fine is not much different to hiring a skip, so that is why people will chance their arm. And we like to see a difference happen. So I hope that gives you some sense of where we're going with that. We're also benchmarking best practice from across the country and seeing if those are things that we want to bring here. I'm not going to talk about some of those tactics because it kind of gives the game away. And then we come to wildlife crime. Now, I am very keen that we get this right from the point of view of the issues around our wildlife and those people who decide they are going to kill, maim, or affect them in other ways. Is a stream, again, with the Dorset Rural Crime Board, and the Dorset Wildlife Trust have met with me. I've met with other people, such as the Birds of Poole Harbour, and we'll be sitting down at the next Rural Crime Board in January, I believe, to talk about wildlife crime specifically. And there is also a dedicated wildlife crime webpage that we've put on the Country Watch website. So I hope that helps in that regard. Thank you.
No real questions, just to congratulate the PCC and the Dorset Police Rural Crime Team on that incident at the Wimborne. That was a good job. It received appropriate publicity, and sent a strong message out to the criminals that want to commit crime. Small word of caution, I'm aware of how valuable special constables are and the massive role they play in keeping people safe in our communities. But rural crime is very sparse. It happens too often, but it goes. And patrolling for days in a rural area with nothing happening can be a bit demoralising. So the Commissioner may wish to watch the attrition rate of specials within that team and be aware that there could be a rapid movement of that team. Thank you.
So I actually keep a weather eye on all specials. I am aware of that. Something that I am encouraging the force to look at more is, rather than general recruitment of specials, if I can put it that way, is to actually look at specific recruitment for specific tasks, using people's specialisms. If they've got a specialism in their work, you know, they might work in a bank. Let's have you in here as a special help in the fraud department. You get my drift. And, and I'm very clear that I want to make certain that the rural specials use their expertise and are not just used as patrollers.
Good to hear, Commissioner. Thank you. I think that will make a significant difference in all areas of tackling crime. Thank you.
Thanks, Les. I noticed that you had a meeting with the NFU farmers, quote unquote here, NFU farmers meeting. Could you just sort of very, very succinctly give us a couple of bullets on the outcome of that meeting?
Yes, absolutely. So you will be aware that I tend not to like to sit in an ivory tower in Winfrith, and I tend to like to go and talk to people. So I talked to a number of people across the county, farmers being one of them. This particular meeting, we had basically three things on the agenda from memory. One was the overall change in the rural crime team and what they were seeing out there. We'd just recently had the very big job that the rural crime team had been part of, where they found over £500,000 worth of stolen farm machinery and had started giving it back to the farmers. So they were very pleased from that aspect and seeing these new resources which were coming on stream. The second one was the fly tipping, which we talked pretty much as I've talked here about what is going on, and they shared some of the issues there. And then we had the one which I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because we have talked about it before, but they did raise the firearms issue, which we're working through at the moment in order to get greater efficiency for the people of Dorset. So I think that probably covers it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Commissioner. And then, anybody got any other? Sorry, Dave.
Taylor, Charmers St Mary councillor, just to say, yes, it has been noticed that the fact is that the farming community are beginning to being looked after, and it has been reported through parish council as well. So to congratulate you yet again to say that we are at long last getting out into our rural community. Thank you.
Thank you, because I don't get a lot of feedback. That's good.
Right then, moving swiftly on. Putting victims and communities first.
Thank you. So there's a number of things going on here, a number of work streams. Look, I'm pretty gratified that we're going in the right direction with some of the measures. One that I'll talk about a little bit is the business crime one. I'll do that in a couple of seconds. So let's work through. So the first thing, something I'm very keen on is understanding the use of out-of-court disposals in Dorset. We have a very good scrutiny panel, which works well, an independent scrutiny panel, which works well in that regard. What I wanted to do was I basically wanted to scrutinise them to check that we are in line with legislation, first of all, but also that we're in line with national best practice. There is a tension here. There are some people in our community who want everybody locked up. Sometimes an out-of-court disposal is a better way of changing the behaviour that needs to change. And it is getting that tension right, that balance right between the two things. The the behavioural change which ultimately helps the community, but also to protect the community in those areas where we need to do it. And that's what I was really interested in order to unpick and understand how that was working. We've also increased funding to manage a higher demand on the Commission and Restorative Justice Service. Now, just to make the point about the Restorative Justice Service, this works on behalf of the victim, not the offender. And it is something that is offered to the victim. And then if the offender agrees, then that will occur. And again, we can have good changes in behaviour, and sometimes this really helps victims by having somebody say sorry, for example. So I've skated the surface there, but I've made certain we've increased the funding to affect the demand that we're getting. We were advised that Dorset would be subject to an inspection into the efficacy of the criminal justice system in meeting the needs of victims, including compliance with the Victims' Code of Practice. So as the chair of the Dorset Criminal Justice Board, one of the work streams that we have had is very much going through the Victims' Code of Practice and basically ticking off every item to make certain that Dorset Police fits with it, and indeed with our other partners. I am hopeful that with that inspection, when it comes through, we get a good report. We'll see where we go with it. I also followed a statement. I also issued a statement following the inquest into the death of Gaia Pope. I'm not going to retread that particular tragedy here. I think that's been done. But those learnings which are required to be made by the force, I have sat down with them and made certain that they are embedded. So that's where we are with that. So business and retail crime. So this was kind of a running sore when I started. One of my first meetings was with a group of retailers in a certain geography in Dorset. And when you have a manager of a retail shop literally in tears because of serial shoplifting, you know that there's something that's got to change. And so what we did was we put in place the Safer Dorset Business Partnership, brought together bids and chambers from across Dorset in order to look at a number of things that we can improve. One of those is reporting. One of those is engagement. And I've alluded to it earlier when I spoke to Councillor Fry. I have a weekly meeting where I will raise community concerns with the Chief Constable. One of those community concerns referenced an area where literally they had 6 people, I think, terrorising the shopping centre. It is very gratifying to know that Dorset Police stood up and they engaged and they put a process around to address that issue. And there was a letter received from the manager of a large store in Boscombe expressing gratitude for an increase in police activity. As a result, the manager reported that thefts in the store had reduced by £239,000 over the last 12 months, with no further reports of assaults on their staff. That is the change which Dorset Police needed to make, and that engagement is now beginning to happen. We are encouraging businesses to report crime. That's why I'm quite happy that business crime has increased, because the reporting will have increased. Yeah. There was another instance I can remember where there was a guy who basically had given up on reporting, was thinking of giving up his shop. He's still there, it's flourishing, because, again, the police have changed the way that they have dealt with it. So that's very gratifying. One area which I'm quite keen on as part of my addiction and substance misuse work is that of harmful gambling. And I'm trying to move that up the agenda. Not just up the agenda with public and public awareness, but also with what the police do when people come into custody. And that's moving at pace. We've also liaised with the Gambling Commission to identify routes to compensate families made vulnerable due to problem gambling. So here's the difference. If you're a drug dealer and you make pots and pots of money, your family are liable to benefit from that. If you're a harmful gambler, you have probably gone through all the household finances before you've pinched something from somewhere else. Now, let's say you do that and you pinch a load of money from, say, I don't know, your company. That company is a victim. When you come to court, the judge might decide to put a Proceeds of Crime Act on you. And obviously, it won't just be on you, it's on your whole family. So what are we doing here, right? Are we going to put families on the streets because of this? So my point, very clearly, is that we've got to get that money back from those gambling companies whence it was put, because it's them who are in receipt of the stolen goods. Now, we have some traction with the Gambling Commission, but we're going to keep on pushing at this. And I'm also very clear that we want welfare wrapped around it, not just for those who come into custody, but also for any member of Dorset Police who may fall into harmful gambling in the future. So there's quite a piece of work around that. And the last one is I've sought reassurance regarding the use of hate crime awareness courses in Dorset, making certain they're being applied properly. Some of my other PCCs, we've been talking about it. We just want to make certain we have that absolutely on the button, because we're not tolerating hate crime in Dorset. Thank you very much indeed. I think I've probably covered that quite enough.
Chris, you are the man.
Thanks, Chair. I've not got a huge amount of questions on this. I think the one that you dealt with, I was going to ask about the business crime side of things and why, what you're saying there is, you're reporting positively yet the increase is going up in the numbers. So I think you've explained that really well. And one concern I do have, I think it's something which was alluded to before, that with the cost of living crisis, we can probably expect to see shoplifting increasing, and there being a difference between serial shoplifters who are doing it as a career and those who find themselves in a position where that might be the only way that they can find food that day or something like that. So it'd be good to be able to see the difference between the way that the perpetrator is being dealt with in different ways and support being put in place afterwards for what's needed. Also, I'm really pleased to see what you were saying about the problem gambling as well. I think that's really valid. And the fact that addressing the victims and looking to recover from the gambling companies is really, really welcomed. So I appreciate that. I think that's a really good initiative to be looking at. And finally, it's something which isn't on here, but I'm really like the idea of policing within communities, and some initiative I've been seeing over the last several months around BCP, with the PCSOs going into businesses and doing street corner meetings and things like that. It'd be really good to get some feedback on that from the other side as well, and how the PCSOs are finding that and integrating within the communities, and what sort of response they're finding they're getting and how that's developing as it's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can take that last point first, I'm pleased to hear that, because this to me is fundamentally part of community policing, is being there, being seen and being engaged. Look, I've only got anecdotal feedback at this moment in time regarding engagement, but the anecdotal feedback I get from the force is they like it too. And there's two reasons. One is because they came into this to keep people safe. So actually engaging with the people is part of their thing. But also, not being funny, if you understand your area, if you are linked with the people on your area, you know who's doing the bad stuff and you can stop the bad stuff. So that is valuable to them. Gambling, thanks for the kind words about that. And again, on business. What was the other thing? There was one more. The shoplifting and the cost of living. So that's a bit of a difficult one. The police will act to do what the police will do in response to the calls that they get regarding shoplifting. What you're talking about is regarding the sanctions and wraparound, and that very much will be within the magistrate and the court to decide that, and they'll make a differential. They will make a clear differential because that's what they're good at, between somebody who is a serial shoplifter, who is probably on a trajectory and working their way through various measures, with somebody who has stolen a loaf of bread to feed themselves. So that's where it will be picked up. So I hope that helps.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Sherry Jesperson. I'm very glad to hear what you have to say here about the priority being given to problem gambling within the community, because this is an increasingly serious issue and it's very often largely hidden. Could I, if you haven't already done so, could I urge you to liaise with the licensing teams and the chair of the licensing committee in the two councils? There's a massive amount of experience there of frontline, these issues at the front line. And I know that the Dorset Council's chair of licensing has has views that you should probably hear and would find very helpful about what needs to be done about problem gambling in the area. So include the Dorset Council or the council, both councils' licensing teams, please. Thank you.
I'd love to, absolutely. Spot on. Who is the chair of licensing for Dorset Council?
Councillor Emma Parker.
I know Emma, that's fine, thank you.
Chair, thank you. Commissioner, you gave us an update on the RJ service and to me, that's one of the best things that Dorset Police does. It's really impactful. It takes people out of the criminal justice system as them going to court and going to prison and actually gets a meaningful outcome. Is it possible that we could have, I'm aware of how it works. I'm not sure that all the colleagues across this, what sort of crimes go before them, how it works, how many people. Is it possible that a paper could come before us at some stage explaining that and also to the public the value of the RJ system?
I'm very happy to do that. I mean, that would be a forward work plan discussion and where it fits in, all the rest of it.
Problem gambling is one I'm very much aware of. I sit on the licensing with Councillor Parker and working with the Vice, John Andrews. We were hoping, subject to COVID, to do a day's event activity, raising the profile of that within Dorset Council. That is still on our radar to get certain speakers in. And you're absolutely right. A lot of these problem gamblers are actually victims. They're a gambling addict, and we should be treating them as addicts and victims rather than necessarily as offenders all the time. And the last one that was picked up by Chris, my last point, the shoplifters and the cost of living, are we actually picking them up at an early stage and refer them? If during the interview with the police they come across they got lots of financial problems, a bit like a drug addict or an alcoholic, is there any way that they could be referred to financial support networks that would actually help them and defer them away from further a life of crime?
So to answer that, yes, and they could be referred to, Simon's just whispered in my ears, victim support would pick up with that. Yeah, and citizens' advice, etc. You mentioned that day you want to have on harmful gambling. I'd be delighted to come and open it if you wanted me to, and give you a perspective from the national portfolio, if that was useful.
Thank you. Commissioner, just a couple of observations, really. I also sit on the licensing committee and would welcome you to actually come on board to actually see what we can go forward on this. Two of the things I'm observing going forward, which was probably a precedent falling our way regarding gambling as well as excess debt and other things going on at the moment. I also sit on the Foster panel, and the thing is that I noticed in the fact is on advertising is coming as easy credit for Christmas. Let's pay for Christmas now. You know the one I'm talking about. It's absolutely awful. 35%, if not more. Something's 999% have been seen going around. But I'm just wondering if that's been linked into our questioning to see about the problem gamblers and also the shoplifters and things, whether or not it could be linked tenuously to see whether or not there are other areas of problems there. It's an observation, but I think it's worthwhile noting for it. Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes, it's noted. It's one of the things which is concerning us as the portfolio, is the real push with advertising. and not just the push with advertising which we see on television. I mean, literally, virtually every reality TV program. I don't know what your poison is, whether it's Below Decks or Housewives of New York or whatever. But it's almost like every ad break has something trying to help you play bingo or something. And the real concern we have is something with our young people who are being encouraged to gamble really early on through games and things called loot boxes and all sorts of stuff. That we need to get on top of, and we need a national initiative, which is why we're lobbying hard with the Minister responsibility for gambling in order to try and address it. So I hope that gives you some, yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just picking up on the out-of-court disposals, do you think the system is fit for purpose, or do you think it's in need of reform?
Well, I mentioned briefly earlier that we have a scrutiny panel which meets regularly in order to basically address exactly that issue. I think where I am with it is where out-of-court disposals show behavioural change, they work, and I'm happy with them. Where I have a problem is where programs are brought in and they don't have that rigor around them to assess whether they work, because there is nothing worse than a nice, warm feeling that something is occurring. So the out-of-court disposal scrutiny panel look at what is working. And at this moment, I am comfortable with where we are in Dorset with the out-of-court disposals that we've got. I have questions in other areas with other sorts of diversion schemes, but that's for another day.
Yeah, thank you very much. Moving on then to making every penny count. Sorry. Over to you.
Making every penny count. Yes, indeedy. Right. So we've secured so far from competitive national funds £731,000. I'm not happy with that. I want far more. So the wicked problem we have, and people will be aware that I've said this before, is the issue around the national funding formula. If the panel remembers, the national funding formula was created years ago in order to divvy up the budget from the Treasury and give it to different police forces across the country. And it had a number of measures within it, but it was skewed towards metropolitan police forces. And one of the measures, for example, is the density of pubs. That's my favourite, because that really works well if you're in the centre of Manchester. It doesn't do a lot if you're on the road between Sherborne and Dorchester. So I see very much a big part of my job in this area is to lobby. And across the summer, I sat down with the Home Office face-to-face on a couple of occasions. And with my other PCC colleagues, we made the case that exactly what you were talking about earlier regarding the number of people who come to Dorset in the summer and the fact that we don't have a bean to address the issues they may bring with them. After intense lobbying across the summer, the Home Office agreed that they would take into account and consult on two things which I think are really important for the people of Dorset. One is seasonality. So they wanted to see the numbers. We put in a submission. I know Devon and Cornwall put in a similar submission around the fact that we have these extra issues. And also around sparsity. Patently, if you have to drive a police car 20 miles to get to your call, it costs more than if you've got to go 2 miles down the street. So the fact that we have a rural area as well as a coastal area really doesn't help us when it comes to the national funding formula. Both of those were taken into account. They have consulted on them. I have hopes that this national funding formula will be fairer. We will see. The last information I had about it was that it will start the public consultation process in the new year. That is good, because that means they are getting on with it. So that very clearly I see as a win for our lobbying. And I also should, at this moment, pay tribute also to the MPs in Dorset, who have also lobbied on this particular issue, not just in the House of Commons, but also privately to the policing minister. And it is that joined-up approach which will pay us dividends, I believe. We also had the opportunity to bid for SIL money with Dorset Council, and we're very grateful for that opportunity. I've asked BCP if we can do the same thing with them, and we'll see where we get to. We've put that into automatic number plate recognition and a force engagement van. So addressing a couple of the issues that we have. ANPR is really helpful to catch the bad guys. Because usually the bad guys who are using a car which ain't insured and it ain't taxed, there's a high Venn diagram overlap with them doing other things, and we can catch them easier with NPR. And the force engagement van, as you've heard, engagement is something that I'm trying to drive up and be part of the culture. So the fact that there's now one which will roll around places with a set timetable that people can engage with it, very happy about that. One of the things which is really important is the scrutiny of what happens, and we've appointed new members for the Independent Audit Committee. We had a recruitment process across the summer. We also have a new chair, and in fact, I attended their meeting yesterday in order to talk about money with them. So that's good. The estate's future work, I could talk about that and wax lyrical for a long time. The point I'll make is we are upgrading and making a difference across the whole of the police estate. Part of this is to ensure that we get better police training, but it's also about making certain that when they're in a station, they can be as efficient as possible. It doesn't help if you've got water leaking through the roof. So we've got a whole program of work around that. You'll have seen that I evidenced what we did in the first year in the annual report. And the last point I'll make is we very clearly have a lot of partnerships which are moving forward, not least the Triforce Criminal Justice Strategic Groups. This is where we work with our colleagues in Wiltshire and Hampshire, and basically we try to make the criminal justice system work as effectively as possible. One of the areas, for example, that we've looked at together is that of rape and sexual assault and what we can do in that area. So that work will continue. I'm very pleased, by the way, just to note the absent rates for officers and the absence rates for staff, which are smaller than the national average. So I hope that gives you some of a sense of us making every penny count. What I'm going to do for the detailed financial report review, just to give a summary, is I'll hand over to Julie and then I'll come back for the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. This is the position for Q2 as at the end of September. And for the revenue budget, that is showing a adverse variance of £1.2 million, or 0.76% of the budget. That is a slightly worse position than Q1. However, that does now include the full pay award that's now been agreed for police staff. So we didn't have that at Q1, and we specifically hadn't included anything for that. So that is the complete overall position. If that forecast were to come to fruition at the year end, that would reduce our balances below our minimum of 3%. That would mean that I would not be able to say that we had adequate reserves, and ultimately we'd need to review the other reserves we held, whether we move some of those into general reserves, or we'd need to budget in the following year's budget to actually replenish those reserves. So clearly not a position we want to be in. So the force have got an action plan that they are working through in order to address this variance, with a view to it not materialising at the year end. They are making progress with that, and certainly the October numbers did see a further reduction. So that action plan is working. So that's why it's graded as amber and not red. If there was no action plan and we were going to reduce our minimum level of reserves, I would be flagging that as red, but I am confident that that action plan will address that variance. In terms of the capital project, a capital programme, at Q1 we did have quite big variances, quite a lot of slippage had been identified. During this quarter, we've actually formally removed that from this year's budget and built it into the proposed programme for next year. That's why the variances are very much on track for capital this quarter. We are now seeing some of those projects that were delayed for the first half of the year have now started. And so therefore, that's why we think we will be spending more money in the second half of the year than we've actually spent to date. So capital, again, is in a good position. On that, I'll hand back to the Commissioner.
A couple of questions, if you wouldn't mind. The Q1 report noted that the OPCC had spent actual to date about 550k. The Q2 report states that's down to 250k. Was that some sort of error?
So to explain this, the actual to-date figure for the OPCC is a net figure, taking into account income and expenditure. The OPCC received grant income from the MOJ in Q2 before the expenditure had been paid out for victim services, etc. Therefore, the net expenditure to date is less than Q1. This is purely a matter of timing, and it even itself out by year end.
Thank you very much. That explains that. The panel understands that the pressure placed on the revenue budget due to central government mandating in-year pay rises for officers and staff. What levers does the PCC expect the Chief Constable to use in order to achieve a balanced budget, in-year budget, and how will he ensure, the PCC ensure, that policing effect is not reduced through these levers being pulled?
Well, you're absolutely right. That is the dilemma, is how do you make certain you satisfy your costs without sacrificing the service and the plan which you're trying to achieve. The Chief Constable has undertaken a number of actions in order to bring expenditure in the current year back in line with the budget by the end of March. These include, and this started quite a while ago, a cost challenge process which reviews all areas of spend across the force, looking to identify savings for next year's budget as well as any applicable to the current year. This is now going to be de rigueur going forward and the standard operating procedure. The established vacancy review process considers each vacancy before it is advertised to establish the implications of delaying recruitment and holding the vacancy for a longer period of time. Overtime is also carefully monitored, and all three processes are reported and reviewed by the Resource Control Board on a monthly basis to be clear on any implications. The one area not impacted by the budget position is the recruitment of police officers, with the Force Committee delivering the additional officers funded by the Police Uplift Programme. So I'm confident with the cost challenge process and keeping his eye on the levers, which we talk about on a very regular basis, that we will come in where we need to be by the end of the year without compromising what we need to do.
Just out of interest, I recall that, that there was supposed to be savings inbuilt for 500k in year. Is that still on schedule?
Yes, it is. Yeah, that's all monitored as part of the process as well.
Thanks, Julie. And then moving on to the capital budget, every year we hear slippage in the capital programme. I fully understand the issue with vehicles. They're fairly scarce at the moment due to shortages elsewhere. How are you ensuring that any slippage will not impact on the output of your police and crime plan? So fairly similar question to the revenue question, but now on the capital area.
Yeah, so the capital budget is monitored in detail by the Capital Strategy Group on a quarterly basis, as well as by the Resource Control Board, which I alluded to earlier, which meets monthly. And that ensures any implications of slippage in projects are identified and addressed. So we know what we're getting, if you see what I mean. Currently, there are no implications for the delivery of the police and crime plan. as spend is either operational in nature or programmes will deliver within the time frame of the plan, albeit slightly later than originally intended. So we'll get there. It may not just happen as quickly as we want it to. And that will be around reasons to do with supply chain when it comes to cars and other issues.
Yeah, I'm aware. I think your finance officer actually chairs that board. Is that not correct? Yeah. So it always slips every year, I suppose, is where we are. And it is what it is, I suppose, but it's fairly tedious, to say the least. Finally, from me being the lead on the sort of finance area, you, again, in the capital area, you presented to the panel in February this year a capital programme that was challenging with some £20 million budget. That budget's been cut by 13.5 million, and as of September, only 2 million had been utilised. I suppose it's more or less the same theme. We're seeking assurance how are you going to keep that capital programme, including the state's future strategy, on track, and is it sustainable?
So the revised capital programme has been updated based on the latest information and the updated timescales. Typically, spend on capital projects will normally be skewed towards the second half of the financial year, as new projects will spend the first few months in the planning and procurement phases. I alluded to it earlier. The vehicle replacement programme has been impacted by the significantly increased lead times experienced nationally, where most orders are expected to be delivered in the second half of this year. And I'm not certain what I can do about that, apart from going to BMW and Volvo and saying, let me build the cars, but we'll get there, we'll get there. The biggest area of slippage is within the estates programme and the estates futures projects in particular. So the budget was set, the original expectation was for works at HQ to start in April. But delays to the granting of the planning permission and then completing the subsequent procurement process meant that work didn't start until Q3. Works are now well underway in accordance with the new timescales. Therefore, the expenditure will start to flow into the monitoring reports, and you'll start to see it from now on. Other projects as parts of the estate's future programme, such as works at Blandford, Ferndown, Weymouth and parts of Bournemouth, are either complete or on track for early completion in early 2023. So it's all beginning to come together. The revenue costs of the capital programme have been built into the medium-term financial plan, with borrowing being limited to assets with an asset life of no less than 10 years. And therefore, I can also confirm the sustainability of the projects as requested. So it's all moving. It started slowly, but we're getting there.
And sort of following up on a supplementary of that, on the borrowing, there has been an increase in interest rates. Has that had an impact? And will you be factoring? I'm answering my own question. Will you be factoring that into your financial plan for 22-23? 23-24, sorry.
The answer to that is yes, but I'm going to pass it to Julie for the detail.
Yes, so obviously we will have to pay slightly higher for borrowing, but we also generate additional interest on amounts that we can invest at the same time. So the whole impact has been taken into account when we're looking at the budget for next year and indeed the current year and looking at that. So the net position is not as significant an effect as the individual borrowing or investing impacts.
Okay, thank you. I think also when you're doing your budget, and I'm looking at the Commissioner now, when you're doing your budget for next year on your capital programme, to consider the realism of actually delivering what is being asked for by Dorset Police might be worth considering. Not for me to tell you how you do your job, but we've had slippage ever since I've been doing this job. So and it's the same old, Anyway, enough. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to follow up on? Sorry, Sherry.
Yes, thank you very much. You've just given me, I was looking for a place to ask my question. You've given me an excellent hook with your reference to ANPR cameras. So first of all, are ANPR cameras now the same as speed cameras? Do they do the same? No. Okay, so ANPR cameras are excellent, as we know. My question is really about speed cameras. I get a lot of pressure from my local community for speed cameras on A roads where all the other measures that are put in place are not controlling the speeding. So my question, is there funding for the introduction of new speed cameras? Indeed, do you still have a policy? Does the service still have a policy for introducing speed cameras? Or is that, because I haven't seen any new speed cameras appear on any Dorset roads that I drive regularly for a very long time indeed. But if there is a policy, could that be included in the SIL or Section 106 funding? Sorry, long question.
Yeah, look, we've just been having a little discussion about it. The funding for speed cameras is pretty complex. I'm going to come back to you about it because we think central government may have a role and all sorts of other things. The communities that you're talking about, I know I've come with you to talk to those communities. And getting a speed camera in certain places, the issue is around the number of accidents which will occur in that place. Nevertheless, I think that there is more that can be done generally. I am advocational with Dorset Council's view around the 20 miles per hour, which I know that you're working through at the moment for various areas. I believe in SIDS, the speed indicator detection devices, and I encourage councils to look at whether they can afford those and put them into place. I'm also trying to get a more general option available for people. I'm not going to go into detail, but there are areas where they will never satisfy the accident requirement for a speed camera. A SID may not be appropriate or easy. They may not have community speed watch, like to do something. And that's what I'm trying to get off the ground at the moment. We'll talk about road safety in a lot more detail in a minute, and we'll come back to you about how the funding works specifically on the speed cameras.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just as a final point, panel members have voiced a desire to do an on-site visit to see how the new build is going on and a brief on the new build. Don't expect an answer now from you, but if we could put an action, or we will drop you a note to see if that's feasible. I think we'll take it on from there. I think we'll wait until the weather gets better.
I was about to say it's very muddy at the moment and not a lot to see, unless you like big machinery which looks a bit like Thunderbirds.
That's very kind of you. Right, then, moving swiftly on, and we're bang on schedule. Road safety.
Thank you. You've had the paper. I'm not proposing to go through it verbatim. I'm going to pick out pieces from it, and then I'll take the necessary questions. The first thing is to say that we are firmly committed to reducing the number of people killed or seriously injured on Dorset's roads. And road safety and our ability to leverage around that is key, and indeed part of the police and crime plan. So we work closely with Dorset Police, we work closely with Dorset Road Safe, and we're a member of the Dorset Strategic Road Safety Partnership. Now, the overall aim is to reduce care size on the country roads by a further 40% compared to the baseline. And there's a vision to be zero by 2050. The key points around this are the performance. We are broadly stable regarding road casualties. Other areas in the country have seen an increase. We know that we've got a proactive and efficient road safety partnership. We know it for lots of reasons, not least that people come and ask if they can borrow people who run our road safety partnership to train theirs. It's been developed over time and to focus on key themes. And those key themes are around 6 priority groups: pedestrians, cyclists, young road users, motorcyclists, outwork drivers, and older road users. There is a graph in the paper, which you can see, which shows that very broadly, we're on target for the 4% reduction year on year. I think we've got to be a little careful about this. I'd like to see where we wind up the end of this year to make certain we're still on track, because COVID throws everything into a little bit of a juxtaposition. One of the biggest areas which makes a difference is driver education. I'm not going to embarrass you by asking how many of you have been on a driver awareness course. Hey, well done. Hang on a minute, it's only you who hasn't, Les. Look, it is one of the best things you can do, right? It really throws into stark relief the areas of care that you should be taking. Not least that, for those of you who are in the rural part of Dorset, the rural roads are the most dangerous out of the lot. We are very proud of the fact that actually the driver awareness course continued during COVID, and we were the first place in the country that offered an online mechanism so that we could continue that good education. I'm not going to give you the numbers because they're all in there, but I'm very clear that this is the way that we get people to keep themselves safe on the roads, whether that be children, and we did an awful lot of school visits, and whether it is talking about being a pedestrian, a cyclist, a scooter rider, and note I said scooter, not e-scooter rider, skaters and car passengers. We also do things which people may not understand that we do, like the bicycle maintenance course. We had 88 people take one of those last year, which is not only about the practicality of maintaining a safe bicycle, but also provides the opportunity to educate more people on cycle safety. I'm very clear that we have to be innovative. There has to be other ways, not just having a police officer stand up at the front and give a lecture. One of the key areas of concern is the number of motorcyclists, for example, who get hurt on the roads in Dorset. And one of the things I'm very proud that our office did very early on was we doubled the capability of the Doc Bike charity. For those of you who don't know this, this is paramedic and doctor from Dorset County Hospital, actually, who in their spare time do road safety awareness with motorcyclists. And it's a lot easier giving the message around speeding in the context of your mate's just come off. How are you going to help him? But also, you know, why he came off, you shouldn't have been going that quick round that bend in the first place. So it is being innovative, it is doing things and making certain we've got something for everybody who uses the road to make certain that we address those issues. One particular issue is partnerships. I'm very clear that we can't do this on our own. I work with the local authorities, talking to them about road safety. We alluded to that a little bit earlier. I also talk on a national basis with Highways England on occasions where I feel that my voice can also add value to other issues. One of the wickedest things we've got to get right is the issue around drunk and particularly drug driving. And we're continuing making arrests in both of those areas, but we also need to increase the awareness particularly, as I said earlier during the questions, around the drug awareness. One of the, I'm going off piece slightly, forgive me, Chairman, but one of the issues which has come up recently in the last month or so is particularly around the provision of nitrous oxide. Now, nitrous oxide, for those of you who don't know, is used in the making of whipped cream, but it is also something that, unfortunately, our young people think it's a good idea to sniff. It can cause, basically, nerve damage and third-degree burns needing skin grafts because of its coldness. Now, it was relatively innocuous in so much as it was only available in what they called whippets, tiny silver canisters. But unfortunately, thanks to the internet, primarily Dutch firms have been selling much larger canisters. The Dutch have seen it as a major threat. They have had road deaths of people taking this substance and then driving. So they have actually prohibited it in Holland. And it's a major area of concern. The Addiction and Substance Misuse portfolio is making representations around it. We have linked in with the road safety portfolio because we know that there's at least one inquest happening in this country where nitrous oxide is part of the problem. So there's a whole piece around awareness that I think we need to look at going forward. But we are doing a lot on various road safety activities. Drunk driving I've talked about, safe training education for pedestrians, which teaches school children how to cross the road safely, Project Edward, every day without a road death, Bike Safe, Doc Bike, I alluded to, the No Excuse Op Dragoon system, which is where Dorset Police use things like the ANPR to track down prolific offenders, those people who just don't care and continually drive, either dangerously or under the influence. Close pass, which is educating vehicles about the issue, passing too close to cyclists, and of course a driver awareness course. So what are the challenges? Well, not surprisingly, one of the biggest ones is funding. It's been well documented since 2010. The local authority funding into Dorset Road Safe actually reduced year on year. And for several years now, we haven't had that sort of investment. What we have, though, is still a very strong road safety partnership. And we've basically invested a considerable time and effort to make certain it stays strong and it can deliver on a range of interventions. We liaise very effectively with the local authority road safety portfolio leads to manage the road safety issues. And it was alluded to earlier, I am very happy to go and meet with anybody from the local authority who wants to talk to their communities about road safety issues and what more can be done. We want to get to the vision zero and zero road deaths. We can only do that if we explore ways of working smarter together, looking at additional resourcing. And I'm certainly doing that. I mean, that SIL money is a great gift with those ANPR cameras. If I can take a moment to talk about a group of people who make a difference, huge difference, to how we're addressing road safety in Dorset, and that is the Community Speed Watch volunteers. I am absolutely advocational about this group of people. I have stood there with them, not quite in rain and wind, because it's quite difficult to do it in rain and wind, but I have stood there with them and monitored speeds. And for the avoidance of doubt, the DRS camera team also work very effectively with Community Speed Watch. We embed a TrueCam operative with them, and we never tell where that one is going to be. I'm looking to see what I can do in order to increase that. I intend to encourage more and more Community Speed Watch. It's my first question when I go to an area and they're concerned about road safety is, can you get a speed watch up and running? Because where they are up and running, they do make a difference. We currently have 86 teams, and this continues to increase. COVID actually reduced the number of teams, and we didn't have them all come back afterwards. But we're now moving forward on the upside. So with this, I will give you the numbers. Between April and July in 2021, Community Speed Watch monitored over 155,000 vehicles. They sent out 3 letters, 3 types of letter. The first letter is basically, we've monitored you speeding, 3,704. If they do it again, they get a second letter. That went down to 87. And if they are daft enough to do it again, they get a third letter with an escalating sanction. And there was only 2 third letters, actually, that had to be issued. In 2022, for the same time period, they monitored 188,000 vehicles. 4,463 first letters, 220 second letters, and 18 third letters. So we're getting more Speedwatch volunteers, we're getting more Speedwatch groups, we're getting more fantastic work done, actually, trying to drive down speeding on the roads of Dorset. I am absolutely advocational of Community Speedwatch. And then we come to something which it's a really difficult one, this. This is e-scooters. So e-scooters could be a transformative form of transport. But we're in the same space as we were with motor cars when they first came out, with no legislation around them. And if you remember with them, we had to put a guy with a red flag or a red lamp walk in front of them. For a lot of people, there is a complete lack of understanding of where e-scooters fit in the grand scheme of things. It isn't helped that they are freely available on the internet. It isn't helped that stores sell them, because they are actually seen as powered vehicles, and as such, they are illegal to use on the roads and pavements of Dorset. They are only legal for use on private land. And this is not being well enough explained by retail outlets. The police have worked with them to explain to them their duty of care with pedestrians. What is needed? Well, if you read what the motorcycle and moped associations call for e-scooters, they need exactly the same thing. It's a powered vehicle, so at this moment in time, you need insurance. You can't use one without a provisional license. So by definition, you've got to be 16 or above. You need a helmet. There are instances of deaths occurring with e-scooters across the country now. And you need something else. You need it to be visibly identifiable to every other road user. And that's where I've got some fundamental issues. So with the Dorset Police, my office and I, we've been trying to raise awareness of the issues around e-scooters. We have also, I've also challenged Dorset Police around what they're doing. And they are educating in the first instant, and then they are seizing. And they definitely will do that. You may have seen that both my office and Dorset Police have had a Don't Buy for Christmas campaign recently around e-scooters. But let me talk about something else. And that is the pilot schemes across the country. So there are pilot schemes run largely by local authorities in collaboration with partners in order to hire e-scooters. And those ones are able to be used on the road. But again, not on the pavement, not under 16, and not 2 up. which are the usual things that people complain to me about. There is a whole plethora of people who are very worried about e-scooters. I met with the Guide Dogs for the Blind recently, and they have a specific issue in that neither can you hear them coming, and they can't see them coming. So if you are on an e-scooter on the pavement, you are literally terrifying the elderly and vulnerable. And that was the largest thing in my post bag when I became Police and Crime Commissioner. So I'm very clear that this needs to have legislation put around it. But until it does, these things are illegal. And regarding the pilot scheme, I would ask very strongly that Beryl do two things. They publicise their phone number far more than is current, because if you can't go online, you can't complain. And that phone number is 0203 00 35044. That's the first instance, because this is meant to be a pilot, but a pilot where nobody can complain about the damn things, or very few, isn't really doing the public a service. And the other thing I'll say, and I hope that I guess it's the local authority who will be assessing this pilot, also take this into account. At the moment, there is a small number on the back of the Beryl bikes. It is tiny. By the time it zipped past you, you don't have a prayer of being able to call that in if you wanted to. In London, at least one of the pilot schemes has a registration number the size of a moped on the back. That is what is required, not only for the safety of the individual on that e-scooter, but for the safety of the rest of the community if that e-scooter is used wrongly, or worse, if criminality and criminals use that e-scooter. It needs a registration number that's visible. So I'm watching this really, really closely. We're making as much noise about awareness so that people use these things correctly in the pilot scheme or on private land, and we will keep you advised of where we're going with it. Moving on to the next thing, substance misuse and drug driving. I did allude to that earlier. The big issue here is making certain that the portfolios are linked up. So the addiction and substance misuse portfolio is also linked now with the road safety portfolio. And the way that this will be addressed is through the white paper, the tough on possession white paper. One of the sanctions there that they're talking about is confiscation of offenders' driving licenses. Well, obviously that does occur in a drug driving situation, but they're also looking at it in other contexts as well. I absolutely support that. Nobody should get into a car who is intoxicated, whether that be on drink or drugs. And I spoke to you about nitrous oxide earlier, so I won't revisit that one. And finally, you will see that there is now a National Collision Investigation Branch. This was opened last year in June, and we consulted on it in support of it. And this is a specialised team of inspectors, a bit like those which investigate air crashes or rail crashes, and they make independent safety recommendations to shape future road safety policy. So it looks into safety trends as well, including evolving technologies. And don't even get me started on self-driving vehicles, but that's one of the things they'll be looking at. They don't identify blame or liability, so they don't replace a local police investigation. It is funded by the Department of Transport. I see this as actually a really good thing about addressing the global reduction in road deaths that we want to see on our roads. And I think pretty much that brings me to the end of the discussion on road safety. It's something which I care very much about. It's something that I think that we can always do more on. And I'm committed to the reduction that we need to see in those people who are killed or seriously injured on Dorset's roads. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Commissioner. I know, Sherry, you've put a question forward, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, thank you. First of all, I really, really welcome this report. It's very helpful to have all this information brought together in this way. I also welcome the ambition to reduce the killed and seriously injured figures year on year. That has to be a good thing. My question is, the 1988 Road Traffic Act puts a statutory duty on local authorities to monitor road traffic collisions and to take steps to prevent them. However, the Department for Transport guidelines only requires police to record injury collisions. As a result, we have locations where mostly non-injury collisions and collisions with property occur very regularly, but we have no information available on these events other than random reports to Dorset Council. We know that the public often don't report these non-injury collisions and collisions to property, particularly if they occur frequently at the same spot. If I can give you just a case in point, Mr. Chairman, the short stretch of the A354 as it enters the village of Pimperne in my ward, the last recorded collision was in 2015, but I know that there have been 4 collisions in this very small area in the last 12 months, all on the same corner. And these collisions are causing very considerable distress to the local residents. The location doesn't show up on any cluster site analysis, and it wouldn't trigger any kind of road safety team visit or any action by the police because these collisions don't show up, but they are happening. Now, this gap in data gathering seriously compromises the ability to respond to these non-injury collisions, and it undermines the public's confidence in both Dorset Council and the police's actions. Non-injury collisions are not trivial to the people involved, particularly in the collision black spots in many of our villages. So could I ask the Commissioner if he has plans to engage with other road safety partners to see what can be done to address this information gap and to create a better picture which can inform our decision making? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I welcome this question. I mean, it makes a very good point about the collection and use of road safety data, which I think I alluded to earlier, actually. Look, my answer is twofold. First, yes, I do engage with other partners, and I do talk about this particular issue. It's not just, I know the road you're talking about, and I appreciate the issue. It is not solely an issue, however, for our rural parts of the county. There's also issues around this in the conurbation as well. And it's something which I engage with not only the local authority, the local councillors, but also other road safety partners. It makes, as I say, it makes a very good point. My answer is twofold. So the first is, I'll ask the question again at the next road safety partnership meeting, exactly as has been requested. So we'll go down that loop. Second, which I hope is more helpful, is actually by way of assurance, I can confirm that although this is a data gap, the force road safety teams and camera operators, they don't just exclusively deploy to areas on the basis of injury collision alone. And the reason that I know that is because I have raised community concerns where they've been raised with me, and they have said that they will put them on the list. Indeed, I think I've just said this, indeed the force receives large volumes of intelligence about poor driver behaviour and proactively acts upon community concerns. Therefore, you know, I can't comment on that specific site, but I'm pretty sure, and confident that Dorset Police's detection and prevention work isn't just limited to injury collisions, far from it. But I think this is the wider thing I was talking about earlier. It isn't just about getting a camera there. It is also about what else could be done. And that's why I'm interested in the provision of Speedwatch. I'm interested in the provision of SIDS. I'm interested in the provision of something else, as I say, which I'm working on, which maybe we can bring forward. And it's joining it all up and getting it all together, and getting it all ticking. That's where the opportunity is. So I hope that provides some reassurance regarding the force and how they disperse their resources. But I will ask that question again because I perceive the same data gap. Thank you.
May, then Les.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, you'll probably not be surprised to hear me say that the biggest issue in the area I represent is speeding or perceived speeding. So we have got Speedwatch, community Speedwatch in some areas, but in some we don't. But I think when it comes to speeding, what this time of year tends to happen is we have what we call, and I use this term loosely because it may not be the right term to use anymore, is boy racers. So people that use residential streets as racing tracks. And this is an instance where something like Community Speedwatch won't work simply because these incidents occur either late at night or in the early hours of the morning where, because it's dark, it's really not possible to actually carry out Community Speedwatch. So just wondering what your views are on how you see such issues can actually be tackled, because while anecdotally there has been no accident that has occurred, nonetheless it's the perception that there will be, and so therefore the residents that live on these roads that are affected feel that they do feel threatened when they hear the noise of these cars racing round.
Thank you. Well, look, I'm hard over on that sort of thing because it happens in pockets and it happens too often and it causes the community a lot of concern. And the concern is not just about the speeding, it's about the noise. And I'm very clear. This is something which should be reported to the police, and it should be something which I would expect Dorset Police to act on. I do know, because I've seen and had conversations elsewhere, that the neighbourhood policing teams will do, and they will mount operations around this. If I can get clear and crunchy, they have the capability to, if necessary, and where appropriate, seize the vehicle under something called I think it's called an S59. I would be quite happy for that to happen, and I'd be quite happy for us to make a lot of publicity about it as a deterrent. Regarding the noise, this is something which my office has investigated extensively, and there are noise cameras. In fact, there's some in Monaco and Toulouse, but I didn't think the panel would appreciate me going on a site visit. There are some closer to home. Kensington Council have used noise cameras. And I've written to both portfolio holders for the community safety partnerships about how they went about it. And the first element is to put in place a public space protection order around the noise, and then to put in place the cameras. I have made an offer that I would help with the cost of the cameras, but it needs the PSPOs to be put in place beforehand. And I have discussed that with BCP Council recently, and I believe it's on the list of PSPOs they're looking at. And the same, I believe, for Dorset Council. So that is two ways I believe that we should address your problem. And I would expect the neighbourhood policing team to use the intelligence that the residents give them in order to man operations. And regarding the wider issue, there are certain hotspots. I know the road you're talking about, May, and there's probably about probably about up to 10 roads around the county where this occurs really frequently, and which we could do something about if we went down the PSPO and the noise camera route. So I hope that helps.
Thanks, May. Les?
Chair, just to say that I welcome the Commissioner's response, but just the one comment I have is that there are more resources, or appear to be more resources, in the summer months where operations can be run, and it's just this time of year those operations no longer operate. So therein lies the problem. But I do welcome the Commissioner's thoughts on how we can move forward with it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, May. Les? Briefly, if you wouldn't mind.
Thanks, Chair. Commissioner, a couple of points. Completely and totally support your action on e-scooters. For me, they are the transport of potentially of the future. They're environmentally friendly. They could save the cost of everything. All the protests we've had in London around Stop the Oil, they're actually this thing. So it's campaigning with government to get them to bring in appropriate legislation, training and monitoring that. So I'd hope that you would take that up and keep us updated with any progress on that one, please. Councillor May mentions the loud exhaust on vehicles. That is a concern of me, and you've mentioned the cameras. The council used to have a monitoring device earlier in my career, but that may be something you could look into buy, because then you put it to the community. If there's a particular problem, they can get a registration number. The local S&T can go around with this particular device, place it next to the offending vehicle, listen to the noise, and then perhaps take appropriate action after that. And that may be something that could be, with one device, managed across the county.
We've actually found that device. It was in a cupboard in Dorchester, and I understand it is being deployed.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks. There's a couple of questions which we were going to ask, but I think the one that the public may be interested in is how the revenue from the driver awareness course is utilised.
I'm very happy to discuss that, Chair. As members will know, policing is a well-regulated endeavour. It therefore will not be surprising to hear that we've taken a lot of legal advice on how these funds can and cannot be used. And this has been built into the financial regulations with our Code of Corporate Governance, which states all charges should be at a full cost recovery and in compliance with the NPCC National Policy Charging Guidelines, except where regulations require otherwise or with the express approval of the Governance Board. So, I can therefore confirm that the charges for the Driver Awareness Scheme, or DAS, fall within the NPCC guidance, and specifically that there is nothing objectionable in building into the course fee an element to cover speed detection and course processing costs, since the basis of the offer is a belief in evidential integrity and a proper identification of the offender. Furthermore, that the charge levy properly reflects the cost of reaching the point of being able to make the offer of a speed awareness course, and therefore it's not considered to be unreasonable. And finally, that the wider public interest of greater road safety through the retraining of offenders cannot be achieved without this. With that legal background out of the way, I'll talk in plain English and answer the question. The DAS course fee essentially pays for the resource and capability needed to identify offending motorists and effectively and efficiently operate the course. So it covers the following areas. It covers the no excuse road safety team, an operational team supported by special constables to tackle the fatal 5. Drink and drug driving, not wearing a seatbelt, speeding, driver distraction, and careless driving. It covers an ANPR interceptor team, an operational team to focus on high-risk road users, criminals using the road network, and Op Dragoon targets, prolific offenders who persistently refuse to modify their driving behaviour. It covers fixed and mobile ANPR cameras to assist in focusing on criminals using the road networks linked to Op Viper and target high-risk Op Dragoon targets. It covers the road safety support team, which is an operational support team supporting the administration and management of the driver awareness course, supporting the Dorset Road Safety Partnership, and assessing OpSnap dash cam submissions for possible offending behaviour amongst other activities. Members will know this area of work is particularly visible, and I and the Chief Constable remain unashamed of the investment we make in this area to continue to improve road safety within Dorset. So basically, everything's invested back into the exact place that we need it invested in order to address the issue of safety on our roads. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the panel assumes that your team does assurance checks on that as well. Yes, thank you. I'm not going to ask any further questions on the road safety element because I'm conscious of time. So I'd like to briefly move on to the review of precept activity. The panel will recall that we endorsed the precept last February, and at that same time, the panel wrote to the PCC outlining how we, as a panel, would expect that, that resource to be utilised in year, based on that's not just our choice, but it's also what's in the police and crime plan and also national guidance as well. So if I could hand over to you, Commissioner, for the next maybe 10 minutes. Thank you.
10 minutes, no pressure. I'm not going to go through the paper verbatim. I'll pick out highlights. Very clearly, I've always believed that if I ask the people at Dorset for some money, then I need to show where that's gone. And this is the whole purpose of this paper. So let's first of all go to the national priorities. Well, to be honest, I don't see a lot of differential. People of Dorset want their policing to be visible, connected and engaged, priority 2. Part of that is resources. Part of that is the Uplift programme. That's entering its 3rd and final year. And for the 3rd year, we are intent on recruiting another 67 additional officers. We front-loaded it, and we remain very much on track in order to deliver what we needed. I am also very happy, I'm not going to go into detail, but I'm very happy that in all 3 phases, in the 2 phases that we've had so far, we haven't just had the uplift, we've been able to get the money out from the back of the sofa and actually get some additional officers as well. We also support the Regional Organised Crime Unit, and for the 2nd year running, we've given 3 officers into that. Why is that important? That's important because the Southwest ROCU basically collaborates with the forces in the Southwest, and it addresses things like fraud, county lines, cybercrime, and large organised rural crime. It's a asset which links us all together, which we can leverage. We also had an offer made to us of an additional recruitment target. And we bid for a number of additional officers, and that means that we also have that grant funding on track for an extra 15. I'm not going to talk about that productivity review because before that was initiated, before it happened, Dorset Police were already on a track to deliver efficiencies. And one of the things, we'd moved the dial. One of the things which hadn't happened was investment in technology. That included things like single online home from the reporting system. We were one of the last forces in the country, but now we're getting that. It is also something called Pronto. I recall very clearly going on a 999 evening with the response van. We drove 20 minutes to a call. Nothing had happened. It was a 10-minute call. 20 minutes back and 15 minutes for each officer to report on a desktop computer. That is incredibly inefficient, and we've moved away from that rapidly. We now have something called Pronto, which we're developing across the force, and that's a toolkit on officers' mobile devices with a range of forms which they would normally have to go back to the office to complete, and an ability to also access, for example, the police national computer. that will pay dividends, and that will pay dividends in the way that the Dorset people want it, to have Dorset police officers more visible and engaged and out in their community. They can sit in a coffee shop and do this. We've also looked at what we're actually doing in a different way. We don't want double keying of reports because we have to use different databases, for example. And that's a whole piece around something called robotic process automation. So this is basically mimicking the activities of staff, reducing the time staff have to spend in repetitive and routine activities. Again, making us more efficient. When I look at the local issues where we spent the money, one of the big deals is strengthening our community offering. And the neighbourhood enforcement team is one of those areas. The primary focus of the net is enforcement, creating a hostile environment for criminality and bringing bad guys to justice. Now, you will have heard of it in the context of Operation Viper, which is to address county lines and community drug dealing. But it can also be tasked to address other issues. If there is a real hotspot of antisocial behaviour, if there is a spate of burglaries, the neighbourhood enforcement team can be retasked in order to support and address that where we need them. But their primary focus is on Operation Viper. We've also continued to roll out Operation Relentless, which is a well-recognised brand which gives the force a priority around antisocial behaviour. And that is put into not just the neighbourhood policing teams from the point of view of a priority, but also very visibly onto their websites, etc. The oil tanker is customer service. That's how I refer to it. It is getting the reporting right. It's getting this whole demand management right. We know that 60 to 70% of the demand that comes into Dorset Police is non-police issues. We know that we have police officers doing things which we wouldn't expect them to do. Staying with an elderly person who's hurt themselves, fallen in the road for 16 hours waiting for an ambulance. Taking kids who have come down here for county lines back to London because the social services haven't taken responsibility for them in their own time. This has to be addressed. So as part of our overall customer service, in addition to looking at the 101 response times and the response times, the force have been asked to look at the granularity of their non-police demand. Because I expect, and the people of Dorset expect, the police to uphold the law and keep them safe. And whilst they're doing all these other things, they're compromising that. So that is work which is very core and which we're funding to go forward. Basically, you will know from the way I talk that I'm very supportive of the good things that Dorset Police does, but I'm also very, very conscious of the need to scrutinise and check that they are doing things in the right way. And we have a regular use of police powers scrutiny board, which I chair. We look at things like stop and search, use of force, police complaints, and yes, the response from the Force Command Centre. And that work continues, and there's loads of other pieces around it. The out-of-court disposal scrutiny panel I talked about earlier, independent custody visitor panel. All these things come together to provide scrutiny on Dorset Police and how they're doing the things that we need them to do. Fight violent crime and high harm. Kind of talked a lot about that earlier, but let's be very clear. Operation Scorpion, where the 5 PCCs have come together, has had 3 iterations now. The first 2 iterations alone took £1 million worth of drugs off the streets of the southwest. And it safeguarded over 230 young people and vulnerable people who'd fallen into the clutches of these exploitative gangs. Operation Viper was launched last year in April. That was to provide a solution every day of the week in order to address county lines and drug dealing in our communities. In the first quarter alone, it arrested 96 people. But it is about the disruptions and the safeguarding that is equally important. Those were things, Operation Viper in particular, were things that we said we would spend the money on last time round. We did, it's working. Another area of business is violence against women and girls. And I'm very, very pleased that Dorset Police became part of Operation Soteria, which is an academic assessment and philosophy. It is changing the dynamic so that the police look at it from the offender end, not the victim end. And we're looking forward to how that develops. The other thing which also has happened is that we are mapping our rape and serious sexual assault victims from the instant they report to a conviction. And we're finding out when they drop out, how many drop out, and above all, why they drop out, so we can fix it, so we can drive for greater convictions in that area. I promised to spend the money on fighting rural crime. And we started almost immediately. And we increased the rural crime team. They now have a dedicated inspector, a sergeant, 5 police constables, 2 PCSOs and a neighbourhood engagement officer, and the 3 specials, which we talked about earlier. And that doesn't take into account the public service volunteers. I think the last count somebody told me was that there were 17 of them. That means that they can do what they need to do and take the fight to organised crime in our rural areas. And we talked about 2 operations earlier, £500,000 worth of stolen gear and the waste. And they've also got back stolen caravans. They're motoring. There's also a new rural engagement van. There's also a new rural crime strategy. This is all working with the Rural Crime Reduction Board, which meets quarterly and is driving forward these initiatives. Putting victims first. So there's been various technological improvements covering a variety of areas, including digital evidence, crime investigation capability, and victim care. It mentions here about single online home. We've also looked at what we're doing with things like interview suites. And you will see there mentioned Sturminster Newton Victim Interview Suite has recently been refurbished in order to basically provide a much better environment for victims to provide statements. And it's fitted out with the latest in audio and video recording. Another area which also will make things better for victims is the idea of the connection between the wider criminal justice system and the police. And you'll see there's something there called the two-way interface, which enables speedier transfer of data and information. And finally, an upgrade to the police crime recording system niche, which again improves efficiency. And then it comes to police funding. I've spoken to it about earlier, but I am absolutely adamant. I will keep on banging the drum with Dorset. I will be on a call with the policing minister tomorrow morning. Guess what I'm going to be saying? So that, I hope, shows how we used the money, which the Dorset people agreed, and you guys agreed last time. And I will keep up this focus on transparency and delivery so that we drive Dorset to become the safest county. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to follow up on at all? No. One from me, really, I suppose, is How do you ensure that the ROCU delivers effect and that it is benchmarked based on the fact that we are providing manpower, or you are, should I say, Dorset is providing manpower to that organisation?
My apologies, first time though. How does the PCC ensure that ROCU delivery of effect is benchmarked? Okay, so I'm happy to talk a bit about what they do. I have to be a little bit careful because these are the people who do a lot of the secret stuff, and I won't be going down that route.
It's not what they do, it's that how you ensure their effect is benchmarked. We get the fact that this is operational, and therefore from a panel perspective, we want to ensure that you are confident that they are delivering effect.
You appreciate my belt and braces approach around a sensitive area, Mike. So let's talk about it. The ROCUs were established in 2009. There are 9 units across England and Wales. Our ROCU serves the 5 forces of the South West. So Avon and Somerset, Gloucester, Devon and Cornwall, Dorset and Wilts. The primary functions of a ROCU are to provide a range of specialist capabilities to forces to lead a regional response to serious organised crime. These include covert operations, surveillance, undercover policing, regional asset recovery, cybercrime, operational security, government agency intelligence network, prison intelligence, and of course, leading the disruption of serious organised crime groups. You can see why I made my comment. PCCs provide most of the funding, and alongside our chiefs, we hold the ROCUs to account. Additional funding comes from grants from the Home Office and numerous other small and often ring-fenced grants. Oversight of ROCU performance is primarily done through the Regional Operations Board, which is attended by my Chief Executive on behalf of all regional PCCs. This board meets quarterly and receives a detailed quarterly performance pack from the ROCU where considerable data are provided. This performance analysis uses disruption reporting as the baseline method of calculating the effect of the ROCU in combating serious and organised crime. In this respect, a disruption is achieved when an activity leads to an organised crime group or individual being unable to operate at their usual level of activity, or where the risk posed by a recognised threat or vulnerability is reduced. Data and activity are provided under the 4P criteria of tackling serious and organised crime, namely pursue, prosecuting and disrupting people engaged in serious and organised crime, prevent, preventing people from engaging in this activity, protect, increasing protection against serious and organised crime, and prepare, reducing the impact of this criminality when it takes place. Separate to this detail, the headlines relating to the collective performance of the ROCU and the individual performance of the 5 forces against serious and organised crime is communicated by exception at the Regional Strategic Board, which is attended by the 5 PCCs and 5 Chief Constables, and where the Regional ACC will talk us through any performance highlights and issues of concern. So we get the data ahead of time, we look at it, we go back and we ask any questions that we need to do. Overall, the ROCU is well governed, not only under its own leadership, but also under the scrutiny and guidance of the Regional ACC, and I and my fellow PCCs have good oversight of its collective effort.
Thank you very much for that. That provides the panel with reassurance that there is a scrutiny method in place. And finally, congratulations on obtaining additional funding for a further uplift of officers. Very, very succinctly, in a sentence, how did you come about the figure of 15?
Very simply, we pitched for as many as we could. We actually pitched for more than 15. And it was decided to be, they only had a certain amount of money and they distributed it about amongst the forces. That's basically the answer.
Thank you very much. That's what I was expecting to hear, but It's useful for the panel to know. And Mark, moving on to complaints verbal update, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just to let the panel know, we've got one complaint currently being investigated. As another point, within the complaints subcommittee terms of reference, it has that we will review the protocol on an annual basis. We've not yet done that. What my proposal is that the committee will meet informally and then report back to the February meeting of this panel for hopefully ratification of any changes that are made. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And moving swiftly on to the forward work plan.
So I won't go in any great detail as the work plan has been published with the papers, but just as a quick heads up that we're intending on having an informal meeting of the panel in May next year, which will give us March next year, thank you, to provide us with the opportunity to challenge the existing work plan. Thank you.
Excellent, yeah. And if panel members can get to that informal meeting and provide their input, that will make sure we have a more or a robust forward work plan. Not that we haven't got one at the moment, but they always need fine-tuning, things change. I'm assuming there are no urgent items I'm looking up around, no? And I'm assuming there's no exempt business. I look to my learned friend to my left, no? In that case then, before I close, anybody got any questions they'd like to ask, those that are here? No? Any final comments that you would like to make, Commissioner, at all?
No, thank you. I think I've probably spoken enough. I think we've probably got the drift. If I can sum up, things are good, things are working in the right direction, we've got to do more.
I do apologise. I think I was hogging the microphone for your little speech here. So if you would like to just say thank you very much, I will hand the microphone over to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Just to summarise, we're in a good place. It's moving in the right direction. We've got more to do. Thank you.
In that case then, once again, thanks to you and your team for all the hard work that's gone into preparing for this meeting. It is appreciated, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year for the precept meeting and informal briefings. Thank you very much.